Burlesque Stripped Down, episode number 11. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Velvet Eau Claire, as always, your guide through all of the secrets and the stories of the ladies and gents behind the tassels. I cannot tell you how happy I am that you decided to press play today. This is a really, really special episode. I am featuring the one, the only Rubyyy Jones for one of those interviews that you're going to want to press rewind and listen to again. And really, there's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of gold in this episode, and I'm really super excited that you decided to listen. Thank you so much for your support and your listening. I really, really appreciate it. This December has been Authenticity Month, and I am feeling really blessed that I have a chance to kind of share some of my thoughts with you, as well as, talk to some of these amazing performers and get their thoughts on it. And it's really helping me in my personal path to become a more authentic person, and I really, really hope it's doing the same thing for you. Last Thursday on our Hot Tips episode, we talked a little bit about defining success, about how important it is to really, come to things on your own and create your own path. And we talked about the difference a little bit between success and goals as well. So if you have any thoughts on that or of anything that we talked about the week before with the imposter syndrome, I'd really love to hear about it. Send me an email, velvet@burlesquestrippeddown.com, and we can start the conversation that way. Coming up this Thursday, I'm going to get a little bit more tangible, a little bit more real life stuff. We're going to be talking about creating a personal brand. So being authentic in how you present yourself as a burlesque performer or a performer in general, whatever it is that you do. But that's enough talking about the future and the past. Let's talk about right now. Right now, we are about to get into this interview with Rubyyy Jones. Once again, you are going to want to save this episode. Have a pen and paper ready if you're listening at home. Jot down some of these thoughts. She has some fabulous things to share. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Ladies and gentlemen, I am super excited today to have the incomparable Rubyyy Jones joining us on the podcast. She is one part Las Vegas showgirl, one part Broadway baby, and one part drag queen. She has performed all her life and all over the world. Since her debut, she has burst onto the scene, sharing her special mix of elegant and evocative performance magic while working hard to hone her personal stripper POV. And apparently, if you twist her arm to answer, she prefers the title Burlesque Sex Education Performer, with acts which are as thoughtful as they are sensational. Now, Rubyyy, welcome to the show. Tell us a little more about that and say hi to everybody.
Thank you so much, Velvet. Hi, everyone. So I guess that I'm really glad that you used that three ways to introduce me, with the showgirl, the Broadway baby, and the drag queen, because that is, I think, all my acts do have a kind of real balance of different disciplines, and also those are kind of where I'm coming from. I was a music theater kid when I was younger, but also just did dance and competitive dance, and always loved playing with costumes and makeup and things like that, and I'm still doing it, which is great.
Yeah, well, we were talking before the show, and you said you do a lot, kind of a big variety of different things, right, in your life, not just burlesque performing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I do. I'm in rehearsals at the moment, and we're going into production next week for a production of Midsummer Night's Dream that I'm in. It's with a queer performance collective at a off-West End theater here in London. And I'm actually playing Oberon. It's got a bit of, though I don't love the term, gender bending.
Very nice. Okay.
Yeah. And it's that's kind of like one of my strings. As far as Rubyyy Jones goes, I am Rubyyy. I'm a real live person, but it's been amazing to kind of create Rubyyy as a persona, as someone who is an actress, and then to get roles where I'm cast as my persona, basically, as well, or my persona is the one going into the audition. As well as doing the burlesque, I do hosting also, and I work at places like The Box and Torture Garden and Kinky Salon, doing kind of more fetish, kind of kink-based work. And in my daytime job, I do voiceovers.
It's very cool. And you're based out of London, correct?
I am. I'm based out of London. I'm originally from Canada, from a small town outside Toronto, but I've been in London for almost 10 years, and I really love being in London because I can do all those things and more, and I also have amazing access to Europe and all the cool things that are going on there, and everyone who's doing exciting things there too. Like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you were in Paris recently, and not too long ago, I guess. I don't know how recently it was. I can't remember anymore. But working with the Letting Go Cabaret, kind of doing a Save the Rubyyy Jones show, and I missed it. I'm so sad now, especially. But it's, yeah, like you said, London and Paris, for me, you know, it's kind of a great jumping off point for the whole rest of Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Like this year alone, I've performed in probably 10 or so countries. And, you know, that's just possible because of where we are. You know, you're in the kind of throng. Whereas, you know, of course, if you went to America, you'd be spoiled for choice as well. But I think it would be, you know, take quite a lot of planning, and it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go to Paris for the weekend like I did when I took my show Save Rubyyy Jones over there with Letting Go Cabaret. It's not as easy as all that when you're crossing an ocean.
Absolutely, yeah. I can go to, you know, Atlanta for the weekend when I'm here in Florida, but that's about it. I always kind of start out with, what is the one thing that you are most excited about right now? And I know you mentioned the Shakespeare thing, which, by the way, I'm super sad I'm going to miss, because I remember seeing that when I put it on our event roundup, and it looks awesome, just something so unique. Is that what you're kind of most excited about right now?
Well, I'm really excited about that, and I've been, since I kind of made the decision to, around this time actually last year, maybe a little bit sooner, I kind of felt like I missed playing different characters, because Rubyyy Jones is essentially, you know, a character. It's a persona, so in a way it's a little bit more integrative of myself as a person. But I kind of was like, okay, I want to kind of stretch and explore another person other than myself, and not with any kind of heaviness, other than, you know, I am an actor, and I love doing that, and it's been really, really exciting to do that. And actually, I will tell you, I can't give you tons of details, but I can tell you that a company in Paris, I believe, okay, so I'm going to say France, but I believe it's Paris, has taken on this Shakespeare script and is doing a production of it. I will probably come and see them make an amazing, their own version of it, but that is happening near you sometime.
Oh, that is so exciting. I'm going to have to find out more details on that once it's kind of released, once it's a little more set in stone.
I will let you know.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, you know, it's interesting you're talking about personas, because, of course, December here, we're talking about Authenticity Month. So it's, we're just talking about, you know, kind of being real in life, in performing, and just true to ourselves. A couple weeks ago, the first week, we talked about, on my Hot Tips episodes, I talked about the imposter syndrome and kind of feeling like, you know, who am I to be doing this? I'm a fraud. Somebody's going to find me out. And they say that even some of the great actors and actresses, even Maya Angelou had that feeling of like, they're going to find me out. They're going to figure out that I'm a fraud. And then we also talked about defining success, and then we're talking about some other things like creating your personal brand and such. So how do you find, with someone who has such a persona and enjoys taking on these different characters, how do you stay authentic in your performance journey?
I think it really is a process, especially when you're cultivating a persona as opposed to a character, about really understanding where you end and where the character begins, or I guess where the persona's boundaries are. I'll use that word persona more specifically, because persona to me is, again, it's kind of like a kernel of yourself, kind of like a little bouquet of different parts of yourself that get blown up to create this on stage or on camera persona, as opposed to a character, which could be kind of like something you just put on. A persona is, I feel like, not an extension, but that's the only word I can think of right now. It's an extension of a part of your personal expression that gets elevated to be used in performance. And I think a lot of people, it's very natural, and from, you know, you're mentioning other celebrities and things like that, from reading different biographies and different histories of different performers and people who created personas, it's very natural, actually, to go through a little period of time when you're not quite sure where they end. And sometimes that gets people into, I think, kind of dangerous territory. And I've been really vocal about my issues with substance abuse or addiction and mental illness or mental health. And a lot of that came from when I started actually delving into Rubyyy Jones, like really cultivating and finding out what was it I wanted to explore, what was it I wanted to express. I started to live my life as my persona. And it kind of happened one day that I woke up in a kind of a bad situation, and I just thought, wait a minute, this is not me. This, I don't say yes to this. In fact, I say no to this. And I think it's really natural for people to go through that process when specifically cultivating persona, because you have to really learn your boundaries. And one thing I say to my students when you are going through these really intense kind of artistic phases and transitions, that I think it is really important to be as sober as possible and as clear as possible, and to, as an artist, really cultivate a personal practice to go along with your artistic practice. So something like meditation, or a really regular bedtime, or I only work for this certain amount, or whatever it is, these little boundaries and borders and kind of check marks you can set for yourself so that you know you're always cognizant in the process. I think that's the thing, like with Facebook and all this stuff, I get wrapped up just like everyone else. But it is like a real thing of like, wait a minute, we all like talk about sometimes, oh, I'm having the most fabulous time and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. But actually, we just know it's good promotion. You know, we're actually in a dressing room that's got one cracked mirror and like dusty floor and like, you know, we're like maybe gonna have to pick up our own costume afterwards, God forbid, you know, like we all kind of play with that. And it's like, okay, so when am I, like, as far as authenticity goes and as far as being honest with yourself, it's like what is the part that's promotion and what is the part that is, you know, reality. And it's very easy when we have, especially as burlesque performers and cabaret performers, we have these kinds of, I know, and a lot of people have said the same thing to me, it's hard for me to have like a me Facebook and a burlesque Facebook. I don't want to go back and forth every time I want to post a different thing. It just doesn't work like that. And so it's really interesting and also challenging for each person to find out, how do I continue to engage with people I actually know and like these different platforms, but also people who I sort of know or people I don't know at all who want to have a little glimpse at who I am. And I think the other side of that as well, as far as authenticity goes, and I think is important for performers to decide, is like, okay, do you have a Facebook page that is the only place where you interact with people who are fans or who you met once or whatever else, and then you have a Facebook profile where you kind of talk about your cat and what you have for dinner and whatever? Or do you share everything, or do you share glimpses? You know, I think as far as me, my approach, I guess, I don't have any shame. I have some shame, but I really work hard to be quite shameless and challenge myself in being shameless. And that includes, like, for instance, with my Facebook, like, I have no problem talking about, you know, say my anxiety or my issues with depression or my journey with depression, I would say, because I feel like that is part of my brand. You know, Rubyyy Jones was actually born out of writing and blogging, and I used to do lots and lots of blogging, and I was always very transparent about my wants and my lusts and my desires and all these kinds of things, and that's become for me actually part and parcel of who Rubyyy Jones is as a product, a real glimpse at the person behind the persona. That's kind of come full circle, which I think is really interesting and not right for everyone.
Wow, Rubyyy, there is so much I love about what you just said. Honestly, I think that our listeners might have to kind of like stop and rewind and listen to that again, because so much of what you just said really, really resonated. I know with me, and I'm sure with a lot of people listening as well. You know, just from from everything talking about, you know, a persona being a part of you that you kind of amplify. You know, that you take these certain parts of you and you just kind of expand on them. That's so true. And then, you know, following up with talking about the Facebook, the Facebook dilemma. And that's, you know, something for me as Velvet Eau Claire, I've had difficulty like really developing a persona, because like you said, it's so much work. We've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got Snapchat, we've got Twitter. I can't be logging into 12 different things and logging out and going back in. It's too much.
Way too much. And I don't think anyone actually can do the true kind of back and forth. And that's why I think it's kind of like, okay, you either, have a page and you say to people, sorry, this is my private profile. You're going to have to go over here. You get the select stuff. It's still going to be great. Or, you don't put as much on your Facebook and you let everyone on, or you just kind of be shameless about it and let everything out.
Absolutely. And it's just finding out what works for you, being true. Again, authenticity, like being true to whatever feels right kind of deep inside. I know some people, unfortunately, don't have the luxury of keeping things kind of together or being shameless, as you so put it, because of their day jobs or whatever it may be, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, totally. And I really appreciate whatever anyone wants to do. And I think the one thing about discovering that for yourself is it's not cut and dry. You can't just decide, oh, this is what I'm doing, that's the way it is. You have to try a little bit of each thing. You have to kind of, maybe go say, okay, for 3 months, I'm going to put this stuff out there, see how I feel about it. And then I'm going to check in, and then I'm going to decide, does this work for me? And have that real kind of dialogue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A big part of being authentic in a lot of different ways is to do those check-ins and to really be continually evaluating, what's working and what's not for you.
Sometimes we don't want to check in with ourselves because ourself is going to tell us something we don't want to hear.
Amen.
I think it's really important. And sometimes the hardest decisions have the most great and exciting outcome and offerings to our life. So I think if it is a kind of thing of like, oh, well, I don't want to be out on Facebook because like my mom might find out. It's like, okay, go for 3 months and then see how it feels. But then ultimately, if yourself says, well, your mom's your mom, but not your mommy anymore. And it's like, make that change, make that leap if that's what feels okay. It doesn't mean every like moment of authenticity is going to be painless and seamless.
Absolutely. That's so important. It's easy, self-reflection is hard and it's easy to just kind of avoid it because we know, deep down what you might find or what is a possibility could happen. And it's tempting to just avoid that entirely.
Totally.
Well, let's take a step back a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about your journey. What was the point? I mean, you said you've been involved in theater for a long time. When did you really know that burlesque was something you wanted to do and was right for you?
Burlesque, honestly, was something I kind of came to in a process. So when I moved to London from Canada, I moved here to pursue music theater. I worked here in different kinds of things like voiceover and whatever before I started burlesque. And basically, I was getting really close to landing these shows on the West End. It was getting down to like I was one of 5 or one of 3 or whatever. I was getting closer and closer and closer. And as I got closer and closer and closer, I thought, oh my God, I do not want this. I do not want 8 shows a week, same thing every night, over and over. This is not what I want. And so I stopped doing any live performance, and I started this blog, and I blog a lot, or used to blog a lot more about sexuality and sensuality, and had this real, to be honest, sexual awakening about myself and about who I was. And then this girl moved in with me, who I don't have permission to say her name, so I might not. But this girl moved in with me, and she was just starting out burlesque, and she didn't have any performance background. And she would be in our living room, like, doing this stuff. And I was kind of like, oh, what you doing over there? And, got to see her little handout, like, what is a bump? What is a grind? And found it kind of interesting. And also, I've been dancing for most of my life as well. And so I kind of just started helping her with her act and went to shows with her and just kind of started seeing different facets of this art form and watching a few videos and thinking, maybe I want to try this. Maybe, I don't know. And then there wasn't many places in London at that time where you could just kind of give something a go. But there was this competition called Tournament of Teas, which it had like heats all year, and the winners of each heat competed in the final. And it was more often for people who were newer or brand new. And I found out that this competition was ending. And so this was going to be like, if that was gone, I didn't really want to have to try and like make something and go out and get gigs because I just didn't know. So I entered, and it just so happened that the guest performer at this final heat of Tournament of Teas ever was Dirty Martini.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, who is honestly such a amazing, everyone knows Dirty Martini, like such an icon, such a personal hero of mine as well. And I just gave it a go, basically. And Matt Fraser was at that show, Fancy Chance was at that show, UK burlesque legend Joe King was hosting the show. Everything was kind of there, just like glittering in front of me, and I thought that was fucking great. Now, to be honest, I didn't win my heat, but I got offered a kind of off West End theater show about burlesque, and I got nominated for an award, and I got some other show, and I just thought, well, maybe I will try this a bit more. So to be honest, my first 6 months in burlesque were really slow because I was still like, what am I doing with this? Like, do I want to do this? And then the more I kind of did with this one little act of mine, and the more interesting and exciting places it took me, because right away I was performing at super queer events and kink events and all this kind of stuff. I was just enamored with the places burlesque could go, the things it brought out in me and the things it brought out in other people. And by the end of my first kind of year, I had created 2 more acts, and I was hooked.
Great. That's great. Well, it's really interesting to hear, of the interviews that I've done, to hear different people's stories and everything. Some people have, what they say in French, like a coup de foudre, right? Which is, I probably, my pronunciation is getting worse the more time I spend in America, but it means like a hit of lightning. You have this love at first sight. They just fall in love. Like the first thing they see, they're like, this is it, I'm good. Mm-hmm. And then some of us have a little bit, kind of a slower introduction, a slower love affair, yes. Kind of,
And that's the thing, love affair, I think it's true. I have a true deep love and worship of this art form, of the industry, of the people in it. I'm so protective of it. I'm very fierce in that way. And I think in that way it was a true love. It wasn't I just, bam, fell in love first sight. It was I slowly came to deeply worship this thing.
Absolutely. Well, that's fabulous. You mentioned Dirty Martini and some of the other people at that first show. Yes. But were there any, even before that or after that, was there any particular performer or a number even, maybe on YouTube or that you saw in person, that really inspired you?
I think it was Dirty Martini for me, because it was interesting for me to see right away. 2 things. One, she is a larger lady, and there was this freedom of body, and that was one thing I didn't like about theater as well. I kept feeling so much pressure to remain more slim so that I could
absolutely,
fit in someone's costume from 3 years ago or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then also I can't remember the name of the routine now, but it's one she does where she's all in gold and she has gold Isis wings, and it's one of her more kind of classic, even in delivery, kind of acts. And what I loved as well is I noticed how much dancing she was doing. And that was the thing. That was what really tied me to burlesque in the beginning, because I've been a dancer my whole life, and I wasn't getting considered for dance roles on the West End. So dance was slowly moving out of my life, and I could not live without it. I needed dance. I needed it in some way. I seemingly needed it on my own terms. And seeing Dirty doing her kicks and her, all her turns and everything, right away I just thought there's space for so much dance here. So Dirty as a kind of someone who's very diverse in body, but then someone who brought a real level of skill and different skills, that was really it for me.
And that's something that's wonderful, that, everybody can kind of bring their own things and develop their own styles and everything. If you wanted to bring dance to it, I've talked to other performers who say they have 2 left feet, so they don't do much dance, and they can do their own thing and really create this very personal, authentic form of expression and everything.
Yes. And also I think, to be honest, lots of times I think if you boil down some of the things I do, maybe people would argue it's not burlesque, because I very rarely use so sometimes I don't use any tease, which obviously that isn't indicative of burlesque solely, but other times, it's something that has no humor or is just kind of like a vignette of theater. But I just think burlesque is really amazing because it does allow authenticity. It does allow expression because it's actually such an umbrella now. And I'm going to take full advantage of that.
Hell yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so true. It's so hard to really define. Some people have these very specific ideas, but that's, even when I did my very first teaser episode about what is burlesque, I was like, well, basically it's pretty much anything. Sometimes people take their clothes off. Sometimes people do things fully clothed. I mean, there's no rules really. And so it's really hard, especially talking to people outside of the community, to kind of explain what it is.
Yes.
I had a friend of mine who, and there's in Orlando, I don't know of a lot of burlesque. Please, if anyone is listening and it is, based in Florida, please tell me about more burlesque, because I've been keeping my ears out, but I haven't heard of much even when I'm here. But there is a troupe that does shows at the one of the local gay clubs on Lesbian Night, and they do it's Ivy Les Vixens. And but my friend of mine was wondering about burlesque in Paris, and I was saying, well, we do a lot of cool stuff, and she's like, well, I'm not sure, some of my friends are straight, so I don't know if they'd really get into it. And I said, hold the phone.
Wait, what?
Let's stop this here. Turns out burlesque is not for lesbians. Not only for lesbians.
Yeah, not solely for lesbians, believe it or not.
It turns out. Well, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about you, kind of in general, or as a performer specifically?
I think one of the greatest misconceptions actually comes from the power of the persona of Rubyyy Jones. I've had people consider me for certain shows where I'd have to make like new work or work to match a theme or things like that, and I've had response actually, we don't think we can actually have you move ahead because they've seen some of your work and they just don't think you're going to be able to do X, Y, Z. And that has really, really pissed me off in the past or made me feel upset because I couldn't do these things I wanted to do. But ultimately, it was a bit of a compliment about the kind of the persona I've created with Rubyyy Jones and the kind of definitive kind of quality of that persona. And I think as well, I noticed that misconception again around this time a little bit earlier last year, and I just decided that was when I was going to kind of pursue characters a little bit more, and I was going to create work that was going to make people go, oh wait, Rubyyy Jones, you didn't take all your clothes off. What happened there? Or, things that were softer or things that showed more vulnerability because, people had this idea of like Rubyyy Jones, fierce, like, this real kind of hard energy. And I kind of wanted to mix that up and realize that misconception was essentially a compliment and also an affirmation of what I created as an artist through Rubyyy Jones. So I just decided, well, this is fully within my power. Thank God I'm in this amazing industry where I know where to go and I can bring different things out and people are going to, maybe be surprised at first, but are fully going to support it. And I just kind of mixed that misconception up. So now already within a year, I know people have a different idea of Rubyyy. It's not just this kind of totally body naked veracity. It has different qualities now too.
That's a really great perspective on, to take these misconceptions that people might have about you. First of all, take them as a compliment because they're not saying anything horrible about you.
No.
They are essentially complimenting you and the persona that you did work to create.
Yes.
And then if it is a misconception, if it's not what you want to portray, then to think about how you can adjust it. That's a great perspective to have on it.
Yeah, and I just realized that people don't see Rubyyy Jones as a persona. They think that's who I am, and as we discussed with persona, it is authentic to myself, but it is not my whole self. And so I thought, well, if I can share that facet, I can share other things. And I'm very much a believer, even though like my spirit doesn't want it sometimes, of slow and steady wins the race. So I just thought I'm going to take some steps this year to kind of give some different alternatives to that conception, because I wouldn't say it's a misconception that Rubyyy Jones is fierce and, this glamazon thing, but what the misconception is that Rubyyy Jones is all I can do. So now Rubyyy Jones gets the benefit of now being this now multifaceted artist, which is great.
That's a lot of gold that she's coming up with here. You better be listening carefully, everybody. We mentioned inspiration, but do you have a particular hero right now in your life?
Very cheesily perhaps, but I'm very inspired by my partner, who is very much more graceful and patient individual than I am. So that's like a daily inspiration outside of my performance life. And I'm also very, very inspired by people like Sydney Devereaux and Aquinos and all these amazing performers in New York who are really melding these kinds of public persona with their authentic kind of lives, which are being women who are of color, being maybe people who are different in body, or, making their bodies the bodies they want to embody. I'm really inspired by our scene constantly and people who are using their platforms in exciting ways. I know there's some people who have real strict rules about their profiles or whatever, like, oh, I'll never talk about the fact that I'm sad because a booker might not book me, and it's like, okay, well, that's totally fine. That I have no judgment about anyone who approaches their platform that way. But what I'm really excited by and really turned on by is people who use their platform to talk about authentic things like mental health and the need for people of color in all facets of industry, and being queer or being fat or being whatever else. People who are really noticing and using responsibly the fact that people are listening to what they are talking about. And it may only be 40 people on Facebook, but you never know what those 40 people on Facebook might do or feel with when you talk about the fact that, this past week you couldn't leave the house because your anxiety was so bad, but these are the things you did instead. You never know what person you're going to touch with you talking about what's actually going on behind the kind of goddess that you present online. And there's nothing, I think, that diminishes that onstage goddess or view of this kind of like real empowered individual by talking about these things that affect us or we live with or we balance day to day. In fact, I think it shows true power. So anyone who's doing that for me is just a real inspiration.
We've gotten so into presenting something, and like you said, especially as performers, because we have to think about bookers and promoters and everything, but even just in our everyday lives, even performing aside, people are so intent with presenting this picture perfect version of their lives. Yeah. Right? Yes. Because everybody else does it. And so then it's a vicious cycle, and we've lost so much authenticity and so much, reality in Facebook and Instagram and all of that.
Yeah. And I think in a way as well, it is important to have still some things that are just for you, that are just for you and your partner, that is that little space that is private and quiet. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason to hide. I think the more we talk about things, the better. I'm not going to go into it any length at this moment, but there's a real lot of talk about sexual assault and sexual abuse and violence and rape in the burlesque industry. And I one of my acts actually talks about rape, and in the act it talks about statistic of 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted or raped, and I believe that number is much higher. And one person talking about it is giving more people space to talk about it, but is giving that many more people space to even think about it and feel through it and actually have a kind of process, because not everybody needs to talk about stuff publicly, but more people need to, or some people need to, so that other people have space to actually feel seen and a kinship and a kind of sisterhood. And that's been really intense, but really amazing to witness as well recently in the scene.
That's a good point as well, because it's not that necessarily that everybody has to go out there and do these socially active pieces. You know, it doesn't need to be, you know, kind of filled with that. And if doing something a little more glitzy and fun and focusing solely on those are more your thing, that's okay too. But it is important to have some people having the conversation or starting the conversation anyway.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like, we don't want everybody doing that. Like, obviously, if everybody turned around tomorrow and wanted to do an act about their personal journey as a woman and their experiences of sexual assault, whatever, fine, I'd be totally supportive of it. But I do not at all think that is necessary. I think it's necessary for there to be constant dialogues. I think it's really brave and exciting and inspiring when women who, a lot of them just do like more glittery, sexy kinds of sensual acts, but then they're using their platforms to step outside of that and talk about that. And then other people are doing acts that talk about that and kind of reflect that. And I think that's what's really amazing about the industry. It's so rounded and it's so changeable, and also globally we're so affected by each other without even knowing it. And I think even though, you know, Facebook is really annoying sometimes, it's really exciting in that way as well.
Absolutely, I agree. Well, speaking of acts, do you have a particular like kind of act creation method? Where do you find your inspiration for your acts initially, and then how do you go about like kind of fleshing it out into something you're ready to go on stage with?
I think they're all pretty individual in a way. My first, I think, 4 acts, which is where my kind of definition as burlesque sex educator do come in, all came about me wanting to talk about different elements of sexuality and sensuality that weren't commonplace in a way, that basically to kind of create a bridge for people to have kind of, again, those kind of cogs turning about their own sexuality and sensuality. Also a motivation of doing some sort of like global sexual healing, basically, around certain issues and topics. So originally the acts kind of came out of me thinking about a certain something. Like, for instance, one of my most notorious acts, which I don't actually do that much because it's very messy, is a balloon pop about bukkake.
I saw it. I watched it on your video on your website. It's hilarious. I love it.
So I love doing that act. And basically that act came about because I was thinking about how do we bring healing and lightness and sensuality and consent and love into acts which are more typically seen as ones that involve kind of non-consent or humiliation or upset or whatever. And so I was thinking about like, well, what is an act like that for me that I still hold this kind of like feeling about? And for me it was bukkake, because when I was younger and like first discovering the internet, I like stumbled on this picture of it and I was just so mixed up about it. I was young and I couldn't understand it, and it wasn't in the nicest tone anyway, and I had all these feelings I wanted to essentially absolve. And so I was kind of thinking about that, and then one day I was dancing around to the Tequila song, da 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 da, and it just popped in my brain, just landed, you know, what if they yelled bukkake instead? And then that's actually quite fun already. And then the act itself is then this kind of act of where I bukkake myself, but then bukkake the whole audience, because all the balloons are filled with icing sugar and water, which is a semi-cum looking substance that everybody gets a little bit of Rubyyy on them by the end of the act. And it's this kind of real fun and lightness and kind of conversation starter, because half people know what bukkake is and half of them don't, but everyone still enjoys it because it's messy and fun. But then it kind of makes, I don't know, lifts that kind of act in a way. So a lot of my original acts had that, just kind of thinking about women's sexuality more specifically, and where do we need lightness and where do we need to feel freer. And since then it's kind of been a more evolution of beyond sexuality, things that I feel are important, and knowing that we have these platforms that we do, and like my Potty Mouth Princess act, for instance, uses audio from No Hate campaign that came out, I think late last year, these little girls who are dressed as princesses saying the F word and talking about feminism and all these other things. It was such a popular video, just these little girls. I just thought, well, I can actually take this a little bit further and use it in my piece to kind of talk about how, these are things that majority of burlesque audiences are women, so everyone watching can really kind of tune into. So it kind of started from sexuality being my cause to, kind of just growing and being whatever was kind of on my mind or in my periphery at the time, basically. So long answer there, but the short answer is no, I don't have a process.
So typically you usually, I'm sure it depends, but you usually start kind of with like a concept and work your way from there and then find music and costumes and everything?
Yes. So unless I'm asked to make something and someone says it's a 90s event, you need to do a song from 1991, I will basically have the idea, the concept, then I choose the music, or as I'm exploring the concept, I'll explore music, and then it goes from there, basically. So it's usually quite a simple or boiled down kind of thesis by the time it gets on its feet.
And just actually, my further curiosity, as a dancer particularly, are all of your or most of your acts like specifically choreographed, like with very specific moves, or do you have some where you just kind of get up and kind of wing it a little bit?
To be honest, I am a great believer of at least the first 3 or 4 times improving most of it. I always tell my students, like, know in your timing, like my bra needs to be off by this time, my trousers need to be off by this time, but I always leave space to just see what comes out. And I still have a few acts where, I've probably done them more than that now, but I kind of just let it go because I do have the training and I know the music really well. And so I just kind of, see what happens. As I've gone on to a few more acts that have a little bit more, that are maybe longer or that have like different moments, then those are the ones that I then kind of choreograph, but only after I've done them, maybe even sometimes half a dozen times, because burlesque and cabaret is so much about that engagement with the audience and kind of seeing and feeling their reaction. It's kind of like then I kind of will collect at the end these kinds of moments and what worked here and what got a great response there and what didn't work and that kind of stuff to then put down something more concrete.
That's really interesting because I think a lot for newbies and for new performers, there's a lot of emphasis placed on kind of choreography and getting this move down and doing this move at this part and all of that. So I really like kind of that approach. I'm sure it doesn't work for everyone. Some people like to have more set choreography, but that's a really interesting approach to, again, do that kind of reflection after the fact, right? To really take that time. And once you're off stage, you're not just done forever, until the next time you do it. You really have to think about, like you said, what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, and also I've had some students in the past who are like, I'll just walk around or I'll just pace. I'm like, okay, then you need to choreograph it. As you said, it's not going to work for everyone. But if you've got a real succinct story, if you've got like a real relationship with your music and it's not 10 minutes long, like if it's 10 minutes long, you probably should choreograph it. But, if we're talking under 5 minutes and you've got your moments set in your music, you just get from one moment to the next, keep your chin up, give your air under your armpits, like make sure you've got face at all times and just see what happens.
I love it. Very nice. Now, throughout your performance, you've had a long performance journey and then the burlesque journey within that. Have you had any particular just not great moments? Have you had any moments where you were just like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing? Like where you've really kind of doubted either yourself or your journey as a burlesque person or as a performer?
Definitely. I think it's natural, ebbs and flows, that kind of thing. Nothing is springing to my mind right away as far as an example of that. But I would say we, in kind of connecting to this kind of like Facebook life, and I think this is, I can't say this is the case for all global scenes basically, but I know there's a real pressure in London to be like busy all the time, to be working all the time, to be seen here, to be seen there, do that show, do this show, and I just feel like, what's the rush? I used to be someone who was really, a girl about town, and I'd be here, I'd be there, I'd be doing this, I'd be doing that, and I was exhausted. and I had no relationship with myself, and I was stoned all the time, and I was not really in it. I was just there. My visage was there, basically. And now I'm much more about having kind of boundaries with myself, and having downtime, and having quiet, and having, allowing myself to have what seems like a much less glamorous life, because I'm not like drunk 12 hours of the day, and like going to fabulous parties and swirling around London and ending up at the W Hotel and this and that. But I am healthy and grounded, and have space of like a kitten and a partner and a quiet house. And then I go and do the fabulous gigs, and it's amazing. I travel to other countries, but then I come home and I have a home base and I have a grounding. And I think any time where I would have felt that was because I didn't have a personal practice. I didn't have a space for myself to exist beyond this creation. And, when you're working in character or you're working in persona, you have to remember, like, this is an actual living piece of art, and it is not designed to exist all the time. It's nice on Facebook to offer support to people, but can you genuinely give something all the time? No. So maybe just say, hope you're well and whatever else. Don't offer everyone your ear. Don't offer everyone your time. Always give yourself that time and kind, because that's anytime I've felt that darkness of like, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to be here, or I don't know where I'm going. It's because I've given myself no space and no time, and very little graciousness, basically, very little gentleness. And I think it's very easy to do. We want to have the gigs done. We want to get to a certain place. You want to be seen here. You want to do that. But if you're real about it, and if you're in this industry for realsies, you're going to take your time getting there.
That's great advice with being authentic, with developing this real internal sense of peace, to develop your multifaceted, you can't just, maybe some people can just go wholeheartedly, into the whole scene all the time, but I highly doubt it. I haven't met anyone yet who is 24/7 their burlesque person,
And again, like, don't compare yourself to other people. Like, just because that person seems to be able to do 10 gigs a week and still go to yoga at 6 a.m. and do whatever, like, that's not you. If that's not you, don't aspire to do that, like, do your own, do you. And
absolutely.
If you don't know what that is, take some more time to figure that out. And you're not going to figure that out swirling about town necessarily. Like, have some quiet time and figure that out.
Absolutely. Find your own definition of success, your own definition of peace within.
Yes, exactly.
Well, this next little section I want to do real quick, because I know we're talking a lot, which is fabulous, but I like to do a little section called Pick Your Poison, and I have 8 different questions here listed out just to kind of get to know you better, okay. But I only need you to pick one of them. So just pick any number 1 through 8.
3.
Number 3. All right, I would love to know, what was the last picture you took with your phone?
Well, the last picture I took with my phone was earlier today. My partner and I both have like a real kind of love and fascination with kind of like greasy spoon cafes. And they don't really have diners in England like they do in America. They're like kind of stranger and slightly more seedy in a way, which we both love also. So we went there, and coffee's always horrible there, and they don't really do filter coffee in London, but we got filter coffee, and it's really funny because it comes in this like individual like strange UFO filter that sits on your cup. They don't make a pot of filtered coffee. You get your own little one, and I just had to take a picture of it because it was hilarious.
Great. Did it go on Instagram too?
It didn't. My phone crashed as soon as I took it.
No, goodness. Well, it'll be the picture. If anyone sees it later, they'll be like, "Oh, that's the one she was talking about."
I'll make sure it gets up there.
All right. Well, next, let's do a quick fire section. It's called This or That, where I just have 2 different options, and I'd love to hear what you prefer. Okay. Just as quick as you can answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and I always say, you can interpret these in any way you want.
Okay.
Just putting that out there. All right. Pizza or pasta?
Pasta.
Day or night?
Night.
City or country?
City.
Top or bottom?
Top.
Mountains or ocean?
Ocean.
Classic or neo-burlesque?
Neo.
Comedy or tragedy?
Tragedy.
Superman or Batman?
Batman.
Wine or beer?
Wine.
Sleep or sex?
Sex.
Heels or bare feet?
Bare feet.
And lastly, Paris or London?
London.
All right. We'll allow it. You have been there for about almost a decade, so.
Well, and also the town I'm from in Canada is called Paris.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. It's very nice. It's like it's meant to be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, real quick, I'd love to know, how do you stay current on burlesque news? Do you have any particular websites or places you like to go to find out the latest gossip or news?
Well, I am one of the writers for burlesquebeat.com, and they are great for what's going on in America. So I do check in with Burlesque Beat. They're based out of New York. Also, obviously, 21st Century Burlesque is really awesome for different kinds of things. And also the great site here in London is called This Is Cabaret, and they kind of cover more cabaret, not just burlesque. But to be honest, I feel like different Facebook groups. There's one started by Diva Hollywood called like Big Little Burlesque Sister Brothers kind of thing.
Nobody knows which one it is, but yes,
Big Little Burlesque Sister Brother, I think.
Something like that. Yeah, we all love. That's a fabulous one.
Yeah, it's great because you kind of see, what's going on without too much like you can't advertise specifically on that site, so it's kind of almost like what are people more actually up to, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, those three that I mentioned, they kind of cover a good amount, basically.
Excellent. Well, for anybody listening, of course, as always, you can find all those links in the show notes page for this episode, which will be over at burlesquestrippeddown.com/Rubyyy. Now, keep in mind that is Ruby with 3 Ys. So that is RUBYYY.
Yes.
Can I ask, where did the 3 Ys come from, by the way?
It is a longer story, but the short answer is it is energetic. And also, when I chose my name, I wanted one that could appear in a film credit and not look too strange. I didn't want, like, Kitten Von Sparkle Tits is always my, like, go-to of examples of, she might not necessarily win an Academy Award, however, Rubyyy Jones may.
Fair enough.
But then with the Ys, it comes down to my writing style and also the fact that, then it would be different. It wasn't just Rubyyy with 1 Y, it was with 3.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, maybe we'll have to have you on sometime again in the future to kind of get more into that story and some other stories that you have, because this has been a real pleasure.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Velvet.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Before we say goodbye, real quick, just how can we keep up with you, kind of get in contact with you if we're interested in learning more?
Cool. Well, on Twitter and Instagram and everything and beyond, it's Rubyyy with 3 Ys Jones. Unfortunately, Facebook is still a bit fascist, so if you want to be my friend, it's just 1 Y. But I've got kind of Corella DeVille, half blonde, half deep brunette hair, so if you see that floating around on a Facebook profile, that's me. You can find me on www.rubbyjones.com. It's always with 3 Ys, and I'm the only one, so you can find me.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure that you're going to have lots of people hitting you up over on all the social media places. And this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your authentic journey with us. And I'm sure we will talk to you and see you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Velvet. Thank you.
And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Didn't I tell you? It's some good stuff. Rubyyy Jones, some wonderful things to share. Thank you again so much for being on. I'm sure that we will talk to her again in the very near future. And thank you all for listening. Again, if you want to kind of find some of the links and some of the things that we talked about in this interview, you can go to burlesquestrippeddown.com/Rubyyy, RUBYYY. 3 Ys on the end of Rubyyy. As I mentioned, we've got a Hot Tips episode last week, Hot Tips coming up this week about creating a personal brand. If you enjoy what you're hearing, as always, please do share with your friends. I've got images up on Facebook or on Pinterest, Instagram, all those good things. I haven't quite figured out Twitter yet. I am just not a Twitter fan, and I'm trying to realize that it's okay, right? I'm trying to be authentic, and my authentic self really hates Twitter. Does anybody else feel that way? Am I the only one? I feel like I'm the only one sometimes. So, and by the way, if you are a fantastic Twitter person and have some advice to give me, I would love to hear it, because I just don't get it. So please do share out with your friends, let us know, and again, email me, let me know what you think, and how to use Twitter. Thank you all. I will catch you again on Thursday. As always, I really hope that you are taking the time to really stay authentic and stay sexy.